What's up guys, welcome back. We're now a few days into the midnight alpha testing, so I've taken a look at a lot of the changes we have for Prot Paladin, specifically the talent trees, but there are a couple baseline changes to the spec that we'll go over real quick before we start the talent tree comparison. The biggest change is that our mastery has now been decoupled from Consecration, so you no longer need to be in Consecration to benefit from the increased shield and spell block values, the damage over time mitigative effect, and the flat damage reduction from being in Consecration based on mastery. But you can still talent into the Sanctuary redesign, which is 5% DR when you're in Consecration and for 4 seconds when you leave it. That is now on the bottom row of the spec tree, so hard to say how much action that talent will actually get. But the good news is you no longer have this enormous priority of throwing down a new Consecration, so you can benefit from all of these effects every time you move out of your current one. I never had too big a problem with that interaction, but it does unhandcuff the spec, makes it easier to move around, pick up mobs, and just be a little bit more mobile. And the other big change is Hammer of Wrath now replaces Judgment during Avenging Wrath. Presumably any bonuses to Judgment also affect Hammer of Wrath, though a lot of those are already coupled together in the talent trees. That also pulls a Holy Power Generator off the board for us. I could see single target Holy Power Generation maybe feel a little bit worse, especially early on in Midnight, but that's also going to be exacerbated by having low values of haste and is basically the norm. Going into any new expansion, it's going to feel a little bit worse. I don't think we're going to be super crippled on class design just by losing Hammer of Wrath. We are losing Eye of Tear as well. Divine Toll is now going to be the activator for Hammer of Light. Other than that, Templar is looking about the same. There's no changes implemented yet for Lightsmith, and we don't know what the new 3 talents are going to be either. But we'll talk about it when we see them. It is early days on the alpha. Generally, I'm expecting the Hammer of Wrath change to stay, as well as the Mastery being decoupled from Consecration. Those don't feel like things are going to walk back, as well as removing Eye of Tear. But beyond that, we do see a handful of changes in the class, spec, and Templar trees for Prot Paladin, so we're going to go over those real quick. And before we get to it, make sure to sub to the channel, like the video, comment below, enable notifications to stay in the loop for midnight changes, and you can check out channel membership options below by hitting the join button. Let's get going. The first thing you might notice is that Blinding Light is no longer a choice node with Repentance. You just have Blinding Light, and of course the talent that reduces the cooldown on it. Not a big fan of taking away options, especially if it's a choice node, but I imagine they saw nobody take Repentance. I did like that with the cooldown reduction talent, it was a spammable ability, which is not really an option you have for CC outside of like Polymorph. I don't know, maybe they just saw that nobody ever took it, so they said we'll just get rid of it completely. Maybe they just took it away for PvP reasons and thought, hey, tanks are already annoying, let's not give a tank a spammable CC. We also have a new node under Fist of Justice, which is Guided Prayer. This is kind of borrowed from the Ret spec tree. When your health is brought below 25%, you get a free 60% Word of Glory cast on yourself. This has a 1 minute internal cooldown. This is kind of cool. Prot does get scaling Word of Glory throughput based on how low their health is. The problem is you do have to spec into Fist of Justice, which isn't really poor to spec in, but something that you could easily get to the second gate of the tree without putting points into. Also, Adjust Reward now has a second point you can put into it. This is healing when you successfully dispel a target, and now you can do twice as much healing if you want to put 2 points into it after you've already spec'd into your cleansed toxins. So, you know, that's cool. Why not? I feel like that's just kind of padding the spec tree a little bit, and not really part of the talent tree, but Rebuke and in fact all interrupts now have additional time on their spell lockouts. I'm not sure if they've all been raised by 2 seconds, but Rebuke has gone from a 3-second spell lockout to a 5. I believe they've also increased the cooldown on interrupts. I think everything's at least a 15-second baseline now, so I still have to look at the Death Knight tree. Unsure about Wind Shear, but those were typically 12-second cooldowns with the talent in the case of Death Knights. But that is a change to Rebuke, and it seems like based on the tooltip for punishment, you can no longer proc that extra Crusader Strike, which is actually a Blessed Hammer or Hammer of the Righteous if you're a Prot Paladin, by interrupting the spell with Avenger's Shield. So also another source of Holy Power taken away. For the first long while with punishment, it felt like they couldn't take away the Holy Power generation when interrupting a spell with Avenger's Shield for whatever reason, so they just slapped it on there. Maybe they found a way to do it and they said, yeah, screw Prot Paladins. And talking about talents that gained extra talent points you could put into them, Obduracy is back to having the second point. This was originally a 2-point talent. It got knocked down to 1 either sometime early in War Within or maybe mid to late Dragonflight, but now also has a new talent under it called Brought to Light. Killing an enemy that yields experience or honor causes you to explode with holy energy, healing yourself and up to 5 party members for a split of 500% attack power. This isn't a huge heal. It'll be nice in dungeons. I'm sure it'll be nice for solo content for Ret, Prot, and Holy. But you do have to now put 2 points in Obduracy when it's a talent you may have even avoided at some points for the last whole expansion. Sanctified Plates is still upsettingly a 2-point talent, but we do have a new talent under that, Fear No Evil, which is a fear duration reduction of 20% on you. This is bumped up to 60% if you're currently under Avenging Wrath. We still have the choice node of Divine Resonance versus Quickened Invocation. A lot of people are stuck in the Divine Resonance being the best in slot legendary from Shadowlands mindset. I feel like Quickened Invocation has been the better talent for Mythic Plus and even single target, although For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is 100% increase to Judgment whenever you hit Divine Toll, from the Templar tree has now been taken away, so that's kind of lame. But since Divine Toll is now the trigger for our Hammer of Light, I got to imagine that 15-second cooldown reduction is going to be better than Divine Resonance. I know people like that free Avenger Shield every 5 seconds after Divine Toll, but really that wasn't even enough just to outpace what the cooldown reduction would do to Divine Toll itself in terms of total output. I think a lot of people are just stuck with that being the go-to. You can now get Avenging Wrath to be a 1-minute cooldown to line up with Divine Toll, but in my opinion, you can always hold Divine Toll for 15 seconds if you really want to wait for Avenging Wrath, and in that scenario, you'd only lose the value of 3 Avenger Shields every minute. I feel like the cooldown reduction is a ticket there, and just people haven't been told to not take Divine Resonance and are just kind of stuck in their ways from Shadowlands, and everything else still the same on the way through the second gate. Holy Ritual is now 2000% of spell power heal when you throw a blessing on someone. This was previously a 100% spell power heal on application and a removal of a blessing. Now they've just packed that all into the on application of the blessing and then just jacked that total value up by 10x. A pretty big heal there. That said, your blessings are a pretty big cooldown and they've removed Blessing of Freedom from this. Just Sacrifice and Protection. Protection is a very long cooldown. Presumably that also works with spell warding. Basically anything that affects Blessing of Protection tends to work on spell warding as well. They still share a cooldown, unfortunately. But you would technically have a pretty significant heal when you Blessing of Sacrifice someone, and that's as low as a 1-minute cooldown. Perhaps they felt people weren't taking Holy Ritual, and I don't blame them. And they've also removed Seal of Crusader from below Holy Ritual. This was just healing a nearby ally on your auto attacks. It was not a whole lot of healing in a raid. It was just kind of more numbers, like 5% of your healing or something like that, maybe less. You could basically consider packing all of that into Holy Ritual, which is a good change for that talent at least. Unfortunately, we still have Seal of Might, which is 2% mastery and primary stat per talent point, up to 2 points. I hate talents like this. It's just stats. You'd be silly to skip 4% mastery and 4% main stat, but what are you going to do? And they've also redesigned Zealot's Paragon, which previously gave you 10% increased damage to Judgment in Hammer of Wrath, and also caused them to extend your current Avenging Wrath by half a second each cast. That gameplay was kind of neat. It just kind of enforced you having a good rotation anyway, because you'd be pressing Judgment or Hammer of Wrath when they're available over anything else. The replacement is actually Vengeful Wrath, and I think this was the case for Holy and Ret Paladin for War Within. Let me know if I'm wrong. But Hammer of Wrath deals up to 50% for both talent points, additional damage, the lower health the target is. There's usually some kind of plateau here, like at 25% health or 50% mob health, you're going to get max value out of it. Who's to say what that is right now? If I had alpha, I would get in there and test it, but I don't, so I can't. And we've finally seen the re-removal of Judgment of Light, which is now replaced by Light's Revocation, which is the ability that lets you Divine Shield when you have Forbearance on you, and also gave you a 10% heal per harmful magic effect on you that got dispelled by hitting that Divine Shield. A talent you could certainly do without, but very nice to have if you have another Paladin in the group that gets a little handsy, or you just want more liberal use of laying hands on yourself. But the final gate of the class tree for Prot is still not super great, so we still have Golden Path and Selfless Healer. Both are just nonsense. Lightbearer is still there. Nice to have that in a raid. Probably semi-nice in a Mythic Plus as well. Just, you know, a little bit of splash healing for your buddies. They have also redesigned and kind of redistributed of Dusk and Dawn. No longer is it a Holy Power Spender throughput and then defensive and cooldown reduction talent. They've just broken it up into these two nodes. Blessing of Dawn is now just like a mass sacrifice above 85% health. You're just going to take up to 5% of your health in transfer damage from your party every 5 seconds. Just kind of smooths out party damage a little bit. Probably not very noticeable. And Blessing of Dusk is just 10% extra DR based on your missing health. I imagine the plateau here is like at 50% health, you're going to get all 10% of that DR. Just a little party padding and additional DR. This probably just helps make up for the loss of the DR from standing in Consecration since they decoupled that from the mastery. So instead of scrolling past it, we'll just go through the Templar changes real quick. So again, the activator for Hammer of Light is now Divine Toll. IF tier has been removed. Based on the tooltip, it seems Hammer of Light got like a 20% output buff for Protection Paladin. Zealous Vindication is no longer a choice node. This used to share the node with For Whom the Bell Tolls, which was cast Divine Toll, get 300% increased damage judgments, which was very nice for single target damage. I am going to miss that one. That's upsetting. And in the choice node in the bottom left, Sanctification is Judgment now buffs Empyrean Hammers by 5% instead of 10%. Applications still overlap. And the choice node Endless Wrath used to be a cooldown reset and free use of Hammer of Wrath regardless of your target's health. Just seems like they want to contain Hammer of Wrath to your wings. And another small change here, Wrathful Descent. When Empyrean Hammers crit, they do 50% of their damage dealt to nearby enemies. That used to be 100, so a little nerf there. And then we do have our new talents on the far right here. Divine Hammer. Divine Toll now summons Divine Hammers that spin around you for 8 seconds. This is the same Divine Hammers you see on the Prot Paladin tray on live. So a little bit of extra AoE damage there, not bad. New talent, Light's Judicator. Empyrean Hammer deals 20% increased crit strike damage, and crits have 50% chance to grant an additional stack of Light's Deliverance. Light's Deliverance is the capstone here where you get a free Hammer of Light when Divine Toll is on cooldown and you have 60 stacks of this buff. So just something that stacks up pretty reasonably, and maybe the 20% increased crit strike damage here is the reason for the nerf over here with the 50% of its damage dealt to nearby enemies instead of 100. I hate it when I see a connection like that and I'm like, well, basically you just kind of split this talent off into something else. What are you going to do? And the final new talent here is either Judgment damage increased by 30%, or Divine Toll cast 2 additional times on your target at 150%. This is another example of why I think Quickened Invocation, which is cooldown reduction on Divine Toll, is going to keep edging out Divine Resonance, which is just shooting out that free Avenger Shield every 5 seconds after you cast Divine Toll. And again, no changes yet to Lightsmith talents, and we don't have the 3 new talents yet either. We'll go over those once we see them. So right off the bat, you're going to see we don't have Holy Shield or Improved Holy Shield anymore. That's been replaced by Shining Light, which has just been moved over and now replaced with Seal of Charity. This is just healing somebody else with Word of Glory heals you for that full amount. That talent used to be locked under the choice node of the heal over time for Word of Glory or the cooldown reduction on Lay on Hands, which we still have in the new tree. We have Faith's Barricade replaced by Searing Sunlight. Casting Avenger Shield causes Consecration that deals damage and healing again immediately at 100% effectiveness. If this is 1 tick of Consecration, it's not going to be worth taking. If it's the full value of Consecration, it's super OP. So I feel like it's probably the 1 tick. So you're already going to be hurting for points up here. And I imagine we're just going to avoid spending the point on Searing Sunlight, at least until we're sure we don't want to spend anything else in that middle gate. Refining Fire has been moved up to replace Improved Holy Shield. This is just enemies struck by Avenger Shield have a dot left on them. This dot seems to have been nerfed by like 70%. This is now 20% additional radiant damage from Avenger Shield. But we now have Undying Embers, which is that damage will now heal you for the 100% of the damage dealt. Refining Fire and the heal over time were actually the 2 or 4 set effect from Avarice in Dragonflight. I gotta imagine we're not putting a point in Undying Embers. It's just not gonna be enough. Perhaps in its war within value of Refining Fire, it would have been worth it, but that is such small healing. It's like triple the value of Golden Path, which on live is 1% of your healing at most. Not very good. Relentless Inquisitor used to be 1% haste per finisher for 12 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Now it's just straight 5% haste. Great buff to the spec tree. Love it. That is a large amount of haste, especially in the first tier. I feel like that's going to get nerfed down to 2 or 3% haste. New talent, Vision of Sanctity, which Consecration deals 100% increased damage when it strikes a single target. Not bad. Any additional single target is certainly going to be welcome in raids, in my opinion. And this is something I don't like. Crusader's Judgment, which gives you that second judgment and gives it 3% cooldown reduction when you proc Grand Crusader, is now hidden under the Light of the Titans Tyrion's Devotion choice node. But there's likely no way you're ever going to not take Crusader's Judgment, so, you know, point in there. We do have 4 more talents to put in the spec tree, so that might not feel as bad. Consecration and Flame is still in the tree. It now has 2 talent points. It's essentially replacing that increased block chance when you Word of Glory. It is 2 points. The tooltip does not reflect any increase in length or damage based on that second point. So hard to say if this is appropriately 2 or 4 seconds after both points and 15 or 30%, but it was previously 2 seconds and 20% for 1 point. So we can hope it's 4 seconds longer and 30%. We'll see. Hand of the Protector now resides in the old Crusader's Judgment spot, so, you know, that's fine. New talent here, Valiant Crusade. While out of combat, Divine Seed grants Shield of the Righteous for its duration and an additional 2 seconds after it fades. I gotta imagine this means that if you activate it out of combat but then get into combat, you keep the Shield of the Righteous for the duration and then for 2 seconds after it fades. Otherwise, this is a pretty nonsense talent. It reminds me of the Warlords of Draenor talent that we used to have, which would give you 20% DR when you were on Divine Steed. That got replaced with Hand of Salvation, which was the threat reduction, which later got removed. And we got a few more changes here. To activate that 3rd gate, you still only need to spend 20 points. So I'm guessing just, you know, 4 new points to spend on the bottom, plus the additional talents here. Everything's still the same on the bottom left, except Moment of Glory, which was Throughput increased for Avenger's Shield, as well as 75% reduced cooldown on Avenger's Shield. That's been replaced by probably a much more desired talent. Judgment changed to 2 additional targets at 50% effectiveness. Judgment Cleave, awesome. If there's one thing that could potentially feel bad for Prot Paladin, it's single target judgments in an AoE scenario, though Judgment did do a ton of damage, so I didn't really dislike that. But, you know, would make AoE threat a little bit better, especially on the pole in a Mythic Plus scenario. So I like that, and also something you can opt out of completely if you're just in a single target raid encounter, right? And as I said, good old Eye of Tears no longer in the game. That's been replaced. The actual node for that has been replaced with an additional charge for Guardian of Ancient Kings, which I don't think anybody's going to dislike. We still have the cooldown reduction through Gift of the Golden Valkyr, which each enemy hit by Avenger's Shield reduces Goak by 1 second. That's a pretty significant cooldown reduction, especially if you have 5 targets and you hit Divine Toll. Unfortunately, the rest of the cooldown reductions in our talent trees are gone, with the exception of Unbreakable Spirit in the class tree. That 30%, that's still there. Resolute Defender no longer gives cooldown reduction on Ardent Defender and Divine Shield. It just extends Ardent Defender by 2 seconds per point, up to 2 points. I could see skipping those 2 points. If you do have Hand of the Protector, then you can just take Sanctuary, which again just brings 5% DR back to Consecration, and for 4 seconds when you leave it. Not super mandatory, but would be 1 less point to spend to get down to Righteous Protector, which is Avenging Wrath has a 50% reduced cooldown, so 1 minute, and a 40% reduction. That'll put Wings at like a 1 minute cooldown and like 9 seconds. Currently there's a bug on Alpha where spending Holy Power will increase the cooldown of Avenging Wrath. This used to be spending Holy Power reduces cooldown on Avenging Wrath and Guardian of Ancient Kings. So a little bit less like synergy with the whole toolkit and spending Holy Power and getting all of your cooldowns back, and like drip feeding yourself cooldown reduction on all of your abilities. Again, we still have it on Guardian when you Avenger's Shield. That's just probably a little bit of a bonus to pressing an Avenger's Shield when, yes, it still does not give Holy Power, and that feels bad. Still have Final Stand, AoE Taunt during Bubble. Awesome button. Gonna love that. Hopefully that never goes away. And then we got our new, I guess, Apex talents, right? Judgment has a chance to grant you Vanguard, causing your next Avenger's Shield to leave an echoing bolt of light in a line between you and the initial target, piercing any enemy struck to deal up to undescribed attack power holy damage. Sure, that was a little weird. Judgment deals 10% increased damage. Again, this value is not going up when you take the second talent. I imagine that's going to be 20% damage. Seems to be a discrepancy here. When you consume Vanguard, which was this first one over here, making that Avenger's Shield have that holy bolt line, consuming the buff by using that Avenger's Shield will either grant you 1 holy power or 10. So I'm guessing that'll be 2 holy power when you consume Vanguard. At worst 1, likely not 10. Your next cast of Shield of the Righteous after Vanguard deals 20% additional damage to your primary target and causes light to refract onto 4 other targets for attack power holy damage. During Avenging Wrath, your Avenging Shield always benefits from Vanguard. So you're just going to have lots of echoing bolts of light between you and your initial target of Holy Shield during Avenging Wrath. We'll see what that looks like. It seems like it'll be a bit of an art project. But yeah, those are the Prot Paladin changes. Bit of a game of musical chairs in the spec tree, but for the most part, it's just going to be good old Prot Paladin. That spec just does not seem to change too much from expansion to expansion. You know, they tend to like where Prot Paladin is. Uncoupling our mastery from Consecration is going to be a benefit to the spec for certain. Judgment turning into Hammer of Wrath during Avenging Wrath. Sure, will free up a keybind for some people, but not really a spec that had too many keybinds, but, you know, hey, you know, they're trying to clean it up a little bit. And no longer being this, like, Rube Goldberg device of perpetually getting cooldown reduction on your abilities by spending Holy Power. I think that just kind of closes the gap a little bit between, like, highly skilled players and people who are less skilled in terms of, like, the performance you're going to get from your Prot Paladin. Might feel a little less punished if you're not, like, locked in on every global cooldown versus somebody who is, you know. But the spec's mostly going to play the same. You're just going to have a little bit of the noise, damage, and healing is going to be coming from different places. And, you know, we'll see what the spec tree looks like after that first pass. A lot of the talents can still change. I got to imagine Eye of Tears gone, at least for midnight. The Hammer of Wrath change likely to stay. The Uncoupling, Consecrate, and our Mastery likely to stay. But a lot of this stuff could change. So we'll see how it goes. Overall, I like it. Not sure what I'm going to put in my Hammer of Wrath spot. And we'll keep an eye out for the Lightsmith changes and new talents whenever they come out. That's Prot Paladin. I'll probably take a look at Blood Death Knight next, since that's what I'm currently playing on live. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure to sub to the channel, like the video, comment below, do all the YouTube stuff, check out channel membership options. I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day or evening. Peace.